Hello everyone, welcome to Modernizing Old Hymns number 4. What I'd like this to be a lesson on today is not so much music theory, but pointing out instruments to you that you may be very unfamiliar with or maybe haven't even heard of. And but they're easy to play, so consider using these to play hymns on. You may not have 2 hours a day to practice. Half an hour, yeah, you can get by on these instruments with less practice because they're so easy. The one I want to start with is called the Appalachian Dulcimer, or Mountain Dulcimer it's also called. Made to be very easy to play, probably invented about the year 1810 or so by hillbillies up in the Appalachian Mountains. The Scotch-Irish people who settled in those mountains thought it very important to keep their traditional music, and they came up with a pretty simple instrument for doing it, and it's still ingenious. Let me just show you the basics about it. Look at the frets first of all, and you'll see that those frets are not evenly spaced. Why is that? There's only whole steps on this instrument. If this were a piano, it would only have white keys, no black keys, except for one. Really ingenious there. Okay. The basic technique is you put the instrument on your lap. There's a scoop over here. You can play your melody in this area, do your strumming in this area. And then the melody gets played. Well, I should show you too. There's 4 tuning pegs on here, 4 strings, but 2 of the strings are doubled up. You're always holding 2 of the strings down with just 1 finger. That means it plays like a 3-stringed instrument, really. So let me give you a little sample here. I'm playing the melody here on that doubled up string. Okay, I just played the melody by itself, let the other strings drone open, didn't put any fingers on them. Of course, you can be more complicated with this instrument, but isn't this an easy instrument for kids to get started on? Adults too. I'm putting the names of these instruments down below in the notes, so you can search on YouTube for the real masters that play these instruments. Give them a listen. They get some fantastic sounds out of these things. And of course, if you put your fingers on all the strings in just the right frets, you can add chords to your music. Now, it was important. Why is there 1 black key on here, as it were? If you look at a mountain dulcimer, you'll see right about in the middle, there's 4 frets very close together. There's 1 accidental in there, 1 sharp or flat. Okay. Because they use this instrument for 4 different scales. Yeah, we always think of major and minor. Okay, they had 2 other ones besides. Here's the major scale, what we commonly call major. And they also had mixolydian. 1 note's a little different, listen. Okay. Second to the last note there was a little different. And of course, if you know anything about their traditional music, you've got to have minor keys too. So I'm taking a wooden capo here, a screw on it. I'm fastening it down here. Now I can play in minor. Minor or Dorian you can play with that capo on just the 1st fret. That's pretty intelligent thinking to me. Okay, and there are some hymns in the hymnal that are written in some of these modal keys, they're called, Mixolydian and Dorian. So, as far as playing hymns on these things go, well, yeah, open your hymnal and look at the melody lines. About 40% of the hymns in the Lutheran hymnal, even in just the melody, have got accidentals. They've got sharps and flats that you don't usually see on those scales. So that might limit you some, or you can take the attitude, oh, that limits me. Or you can take the attitude, that challenges me. And what can you do with it? Can you play it just that one note a half step off and get by with it? You'll have to take what you know about music theory and see if you can come up with a solution. So about 60% of the hymns in the Lutheran hymnal you can play on here. They're not, some of them are, if you look at the accompaniments in the Lutheran hymnal, alto, tenor, bass, you'll find even more accidentals there. So getting this instrument to sound exactly like the hymns are played in the Lutheran hymnal is going to be impossible, but it can still be done in a good sounding way, a beautiful sounding way. Now, in recent decades, some people have thought, well, what if I take the technology of this instrument and put it in more of a guitar form? That's what this instrument is. This is called a Dulcitar because it's a cross between a dulcimer and a guitar. It also has the 4 strings. 2 of the strings are doubled up, so it plays like it's got 3 strings. I don't believe the company that makes these is in business anymore, but you can find other names down below, Merlin or StrumStick. StrumStick only has 3 strings. So they play in just 2 keys. The outer strings are in D. The middle string you can tune to A. And there's your D chord. You can play in the key of D. Or you can tune it down to G, like I have here, and play in the key of G. Well, here we go. And that's just playing the melody and letting the other 2 notes drone. Yes, you can play full chords on them. No black keys. It's possible to play half steps on one of these. Well, you see I've got 2 frets here that are extra big. Why? Because there's no half step in between. But if I push the strings way to the side, I can get that half note in there. I can still work it in there. A little more challenging for playing hymns from the Lutheran hymnal. Another important thing about this is that I see this more and more with music instructors. Some kid comes up to them, I want to play the guitar. And they say, well, okay, kid, but first we're going to start you on the ukulele, and you can work your way up to the guitar. Well, why don't they say this instrument? I think even a lot of music teachers don't know that they exist. Okay, but adults too. You want to play the guitar? Well, brand new, you can get one of these for $150, $200, pretty reasonably priced as far as musical instruments go. And start learning. And depending on the time you have to practice, you just might end up liking this better. Doing fancy things with a simpler instrument is a lot easier than doing fancy things with a fancy instrument. Really, it is. Another thing is a great way to get kids started, but don't think they're just for kids. You can get these with pickups in them, electronic microphones inside. Hook them up to an amplifier, and it'll play like an electric guitar, except only half as hard. So, different reasons to consider this thing. Again, you can take that pickup, hook it up to a guitar, to a computer, that is, with the right software, you can make this thing sound like a pipe organ. Kind of blows my mind, but one of these simple instruments could fill in for the organist. Of course, it's impossible to get them to sound exactly as they would in a Lutheran hymnal, but it's okay to have a little fun praising the Lord, isn't it? The next instrument I want to point out is, when I was learning guitar, I was just amazed by violinists. How do they know where to put their fingers? There's no frets on this instrument. Where do they know to play the notes? Well, let me point out a couple of things. If you're bowing a violin with a bow like this, you're usually playing just one note at a time. So that makes it a little easier for you to remember just where to put your finger, even though there are no frets there. Just one note at a time, yeah. It's possible to do two notes at a time with a bow. Why only two? Why not all four? Because the violin has a curved bridge. It's not flat. You can't get the bow across all four strings at the same time. So beginning a violin compared to beginning guitar, I should say the violin is a little easier for beginners. And again, of course, they can get much more complicated. For the rest of you too, who play one-string instruments, the flute, or something like this, please learn a little bit about the musical chords too. It can help you to produce easy counter melodies to your melody, maybe even by ear if you get those chords memorized. If you play with a group of people who do have chorded instruments, it might help you to understand them a little bit. And again, there are electric violins you can plug into the amplifier. Yes. Now you're thinking, well, what if I took this and put it upright like a guitar and made the bridge flat and put frets on it so I could play chords on it? That would be the mandolin. Mandolins have 8 strings, but all the strings are doubled up, so it plays like a 4-string instrument. The bad news of that is it takes twice as much muscle to hold the strings down. The good news is there's more resonance. And just like with the violin, if you don't like the high-pitched instruments, well, the high-pitched instruments, of course, are the best ones for bringing out melodies. The lower-pitched ones tend to do background more. But if you like the lower-pitched ones, there's the cello, okay, bass, violin. The same thing with the mandolin. It comes in different sizes. I think worth mentioning here is the Irish bouzouki, which is very much like a mandolin, except about the size of a guitar, or even closer to a banjo. So those are easy alternatives to think of as well. And folks, the world needs more violinists and more mandolin players. Okay, please, if you don't know what instrument you really want to play, think about those. Another thing worth mentioning here, I think, is the baritone ukulele. You've seen lots of little ukuleles, people playing them up here, ting-a-ling-ling. The baritone ukulele is almost as big as a guitar, and it's got much lower pitch strings, only 4 strings. Quite a bit easier to play than a guitar. Something else you might think about as an easy alternative to a guitar. The next instrument I want to point out to you, I think, is the great undiscovered instrument of the last century and a half. It's commonly called an autoharp. Autoharp is technically a brand name, but everybody uses it anyway. It started with a zither. Get rid of this box, and you've got a zither. It's kind of hard to play all those little strings, right? So somebody, this was patented in 1882, put this box on here, And if you can see those, there's black felt pads underneath these bars. What happens when I push the bar down with the button, the pads keep some notes from sounding. So instead of getting this, if I press the button down, if you look at here, it says G major. And sorry, that's reversed, but yeah, sure enough, that's a G major chord. All the bad notes can't play. Okay, this has 12 different chords on it. You can get auto harps with 15 or 21 chords on them. A lot of people think these are for kids. Not necessarily. Even if you look at this one, look at that. It's got numbers at the bottom. It shows you what the notes look like. You print it in regular music. You can take the book and you can just play it by the numbers. Oh, it's so easy. They are very educational. Think of Sunday school, grade school. You can have one of the kids, they've got any sense of rhythm at all, just play along. I am trusting thee, Lord Jesus, while everybody else is singing. And because it's only pushing buttons, why not add the second chord? Trusting only thee, trusting thee. Well, again, look up the masters down below and see what they can do with it. This is not just for kids. It's possible to, like I showed you with the guitar, to strum up to the melody note. Okay. The bad news is that the things I've been teaching you about playing on just one chord, if you're playing the melody on the instrument, you cannot play it on just one chord. You can't play an A while you're playing a G chord on the dulcimer. It's just not going to work. So dulcimer players change chords about twice as much as a guitar player would have to. Another bad news, 36 strings, little tiny tuning pegs. It's hard to get them in tune just right. Make sure you get an electronic tuner if you buy one of these. It'll help you out a lot. Almost all the hymns in the Lutheran hymnal can be played on an auto harp. You might have to change the key. The more buttons you get, the less chance there is that you'll have to change the key. But you're going to have to do some key changing to get the hymns to sound just like they do in the hymnal otherwise. The next instrument I want to point out is my chief instrument, the banjo. There are banjos and there are banjos. What you see on TV, what you see in bluegrass bands are typically banjos that have a big wooden cover on the back here called a resonator, and they've got sound holes going all around the edge. They're loud. They have brass tone rings inside. That really gives them the clang, clang, clang noise that you typically hear with a banjo. I do not have a banjo like that. You see it's open back. That helps to make it quieter, makes it a little mellower sounding. There's lots of lies out there about banjos. They are not harder to play than guitars. They are considerably easier. A guitar has 6 strings for each hand. This banjo has 5 strings for this hand and just 4 for this hand. You don't even have to play bar chords if you've only got 4 strings. They're considerably easier. Another lie I hear is banjos only sound good if they play fast. Notice the mellowness of the sound compared to a regular banjo. This has no tone ring. Okay. Another thing it's got is what's called a scoop. I don't know if you can see my eye through this hole here. If I play up here, that's even mellower sound than playing down here, isn't it? So, different ways to keep your banjo mellow. Now the banjo I'm playing here does have a tone ring in it. It's just a simple brass ring. You can kind of see it underneath the skin here. It's a little bit transparent. I mellow this one out in a different way with a relatively new invention called Nile gut. These strings are Nile gut strings. They're made out of nylon, but they imitate the old strings from the old days that were made out of animal guts. Okay, the different kind of sound there, isn't there? A lot of people I know who play banjos like this, and why do I play this mellower, quieter banjo? Because I like to sing along with it. Okay, I don't want the banjo to drown me out. But a lot of people still find them too loud, so they take a rag, shove it in between the control rod and the head of the skin. At the bottom of every banjo there's a drum, and listen to how mellow it is now. So, yeah, almost as mellow as a guitar, a little more plucky sounding, and I like that. Oh, here's another possible alternative to a guitar for you. The mellowest banjo of all is a gourd banjo, and I'm sorry I don't have a gourd banjo, but I've got the next best thing. Instead of having a gourd down here, it has a wooden hoop, and an animal skin is stretched across it. This is more like some of the first banjos that were ever made. This is calf skin, stretched across there to make that drum. And these are Nile gut strings. I haven't been able to find real gut strings for a banjo, so I used a Nile gut. Notice they're quite a bit lower in pitch. That's the way banjos started. Well, let me hold that up to the mic. It's hard to really catch that beautiful sound on a microphone. Oh, I like that. So... Oh, yeah. Notice, don't fret it. There's no frets on this old banjo. Tend to just finger one string at a time again, because they were simpler instrument. Have you ever wondered what David's harp sound like? David's harp was probably had strings made out of goat guts. This is the closest instrument I have to David's harp. What did Martin Luther's lute sound like? Yeah, he had these old wooden pegs too. They're not easy to work. They tend to go just a little too far, a little short, and you never get them just right. He had frets on his instrument. They were pieces of little leather shoelace. Tie them on. So not only did you tune your strings, you tuned your frets as well. You had to make sure they were in the right place. Now you can find recordings on YouTube of people with real lutes playing a mighty fortress. But this is the closest I've got to it. The reason I'm pointing this out here is, have you ever thought, oh, those old hymn composers, why did they play so slow? Cut them a little slack, okay? Look at the materials they had to work with. This also is a relatively new invention. It's called a banjola. Basically, banjo strings up here, but a body more like a guitar on the bottom. And when I play this, I do like to play it a little more like a guitar. Anything you play, you don't have to. You don't have to play like that on a banjo. There's other ways of playing. Anything you play on a guitar can be adapted to a banjo. You usually have to simplify it, use fewer fingers on this hand to do it, but oh, let's see here. More like that. Okay, so another, they're kind of rare and kind of expensive yet, but maybe a possible alternative to a guitar. If you tried playing the guitar before and you couldn't stretch your fingers across all 6 of those strings, don't give up. Find another instrument that fits you better. I just want to put some footnotes in here too for keyboard players. A lot of the things I'm teaching here apply to the keyboard as well. Here's a G chord. GBD. And add the melody on just one chord. And you can find just big lists on the internet of all the different chords, what notes to play on the piano. You get those memorized. Have you ever heard anybody play the piano by ear? How do they do that? It's usually because they memorize those chords. That's one way to simplify your playing. And if you're thinking, oh, that's too simple, how about one of the young musicians in your congregation? Let them up at the organ once, okay? Just once with a one chord song. Don't you think that would do something to improve their interest in church music? One thing I can point out here too, one of the advantages of the stringed instrument. So what do you see of me if I'm teaching the Sunday school choir here right now? Well, what do you see of me? Okay, not if I've got one of those stringed instruments, they can see me better. If they forget the words, you can mouth the words for them and try to get them to remember. An advantage of those small stringed instruments there. What else am I going to say here? Well, I'll save the rest for next time. We're going to look at one more one-chord hymn. That is the most famous Lutheran hymn of all, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. Yes, it can be played on one chord. Thank you for watching.